Families who've decided they want to adopt domestically mean that they want to adopt within the country where they live, whether that's Canada, a Canadian adopting a Canadian child, a U.S. citizen adopting a U.S.-born child. And within the realm of adopting domestically, there are multiple ways to do this. One can adopt domestically independently, where you somehow make the match between yourself and an expectant couple considering making an adoption plan and pull that together, usually with the assistance of an adoption attorney. Or you can adopt through a private agency. Private agencies are agencies that are almost always not-for-profit, not 100% of the time, but most of the time they are. And they are they are licensed by their states, they are run by a board of directors that provides oversight for them. They are sometimes religiously affiliated. Jewish social services, Catholic social services, LDS social services, but they are not always religiously affiliated, and not all religiously affiliated agencies place only with people from that religion. That's important to understand while you're searching. A public agency, on the other hand, the third route to adopting domestically, is the agency that is the arm of the state. This is the agency that deals with children who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected, where parental rights for the birth parents have been terminated either voluntarily or involuntarily by the courts, who see that the child is in need of rescue in some way. Children of all ages move into that system, but for the most part, since it's the goal in every state to try to reunite a mother and her child, a father and his child, usually each state's goals are pretty flexible for trying to allow birth parents to get their acts together and reclaim their children.
I think it's important that people understand the difference between independent adoption and agency adoption. In independent adoption, birth parents knowingly and voluntarily consent to the termination of their parental rights and the creation of parental rights in the adoptive parents. It is indeed a private, a personal, and independent arrangement. Now, in agency adoption, on the other hand, birth parents relinquish their parental rights to a licensed child welfare agency. The agency then places the child with the adoptive parents. In terms of how they are alike and how they are different, one of the reasons that independent adoption tends to be more popular than it was in the past is that in many ways it eliminates some of the restrictions. For example, in independent adoption, there usually aren't any restrictions on the age of the adoptive parents, their religion, their background. It is an option for same-sex couples, for example. Agency adoption, depending upon the agency, may have restrictions on some of those factors. In terms of cost, independent adoption tends to have a relatively high price tag on it if we're talking about birth parents and adoptive parents who don't know each other and don't have a prior relationship. When they have a prior relationship in independent adoption, sometimes adoptions occur at virtually no cost. In agency adoptions, it tends to be non-related infant adoptions, and in that case, it can also be expensive depending upon the agency.
Agency adoption can be expensive. Private agency adoption can be financially arranged in a number of ways. Some agencies operate on a sliding scale, some use a flat fee, some take a percentage of your income for a particular year, and that's all quite different, questions that you should be asking them. But roughly, most agency adoptions, private agency adoptions, are going to cost between $10,000 and $25,000 a year $10,000 and $25,000 for a domestic adoption, and most of the time it's going to be toward the low end of that instead of toward the high. Families who want to use the public agency, and one of the reasons families choose the public agency is because there's almost never a cost involved, or if there is a cost involved, it's really quite minimal and may involve only your decision to go outside the public agency and hire an attorney for a few hours to look at those contracts or finalize the adoption. what needs to be done when looking at a public adoption is to realize that babies come through public adoption very rarely. And usually what happens is the children who come into the system age into toddlers before they're available for adoption, or may be replaced with their birth parents and come back into the system and then age into school-age children. So the answer for folks who are interested in adopting a child as young as possible and still using the public system is to become foster parents, because now it's seen by almost every state in the country, because it's basically national policy in the Department of Health and Human Services, that children need as few changes as possible in their lives. So if we can recruit families who are willing to foster children with the idea that if these children are not returned to their birth families, they will become their adoptive parents, there will be less disruption for the children involved.
I think it's really important. I think in summary, I would say it's really important for adoptive parents, first of all, to realize that that adoption is an incredible journey. It's an incredible journey. It's an adventure. There are a lot of unknowns attached to it, but many rewards as well. And there are many forms of adoption. There are open adoptions, there are international adoptions, there are adoptions of children with special needs, and each of them really brings special issues, special considerations, but also many potential rewards. I'm thinking one of the questions we asked the adolescents in our study was, if you were giving advice to somebody who was thinking about adopting, what would that be? And I can't tell you how many of them used the words, go for it. I mean, they just said go for it, because from their perspective as being a teenager who was in this family, you know, most of them by and large have had wonderful experiences, and they feel adoption is really a great thing.